So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the third and the final meeting of the webinar series of the Global Initiative on the Unique Identifier for Business. So this is the final of the webinar series that bring together many different friends and colleagues with strong interest on the unique identifier to support the collaboration on how we are able to have identify the unique identifier and then to improve the linkage for this for the business registration system and also for the statistical business register. And today we are also grateful we have many distinguished speakers to share their insight on this topic. But before we start the discussion, there are several housekeeping announcements that I would like to make. And the meeting will be recorded. And we also ask you to mute yourself while the meeting is running on. And today there are quite a lot of active discussion session, and we encourage you to actively participate in the session during the Q&A and also the roundtable discussion, and also post message in the chat. And we as UNST, we have our colleague and then to monitor the chat and then to answer your query. So if you have any technical problems with regard to the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us, and we have our colleague to provide support online. So thank you so much once again, but without further ado, now I will pass the time to Stephen Scheinfrost, our Director of the United Nations Statistics Division, to give us the opening remarks. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julian, for this introduction, and welcome, a very warm welcome on a very cold New York morning to this intrepid core group who is dedicated to this very important topic, the Global Initiative on Unique Identifier for Businesses. So as Julian said, this is the third and final meeting in this webinar. It's my pleasure to welcome you all. You have quite a program, so I'll keep my introduction short. The series was organized by us, the UN Statistics Division, in collaboration with the UN Committee of Experts on Business and Trade Statistics and the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, GLAIF, to respond to a call by our UN Statistical Commission to improve the availability of unique identifiers for business in order to promote access to and sharing of administrative data for statistical business registers. So this is the third meeting. Let me give you a short recap of the first and the second meeting. They were very well attended. We were happy to see over 120 participants join each of the first two webinars. And what was really heartening was that we had a very diverse participation with colleagues from central banks, national statistical offices, registers, experts from business registrar authorities and other administrative sources, as well as other stakeholders from international and regional organizations who joined these discussions. So the success of these meetings was already of bringing all of these different communities together. This is important as we continue to work together in a coordinated manner for a more effective use of administrative data for the statistical business register, for the ultimate goal to provide, of course, high quality data and information for policy making and policy monitoring. So in the first meeting in October, we had an overview of the various of this global initiative and underscored the importance for the various stakeholders. The messages from the speakers was pretty clear in pointing to the importance of the availability of unique identifiers at the country level, calling for the establishment of unique identifiers in countries when they are still missing, and promoting the access to administrative sources for statistical business registers. In the second meeting, we reviewed the current practices on how business registers operate in both developed and developing countries, with similarities and differences. And of course, we heard about country practices, among them Uganda, Netherlands, and Denmark, their experiences in setting up business registers and using business registries information for statistical purposes. The importance of the use of unique identifiers and microdata linking to improve statistical business registers was reiterated at the meeting. So what's happening today? We will focus on providing a platform for business registration stakeholders and national statistical offices to address perhaps some of the biggest challenges faced by organizations for the management of national unique identifiers and the access to this information by national statistical offices for developing and maintaining statistical business registers. The meeting will also discuss how the global initiative on unique identifiers for businesses could help to address these challenges and improve the linkage of business records for statistical purposes. We have, of course, a fabulous cast, and I have to thank the many speakers that are representing the various communities. First and foremost, Hank Hermans from Statistics Netherlands, who will provide a more detailed review of the first two webinars. Robert Kirschner from the Deutsche Bundesbank, who will help us to have a better understanding of the use of unique identifiers by a central bank, and James Tebrake to provide a view on data sharing and access from the point of view of the International Monitor Fund. A thank to you also, Monica Canafolia from the UN Commission on International Trade Laws, for chairing this opening session. I'm also grateful that we have distinguished panelists for our panel discussion, starting with our very own Vibeke Strich-Nielsen, our interregional advisor on statistical training and capacity building here at UNSD. Gerard Hartzink, chair of the International Chamber of Commerce Digital Standards Initiative, and as well as two colleagues from the World Bank, Dobromir Christoph, a senior economist, and Numa Freire de Magalhães, a senior e-government specialist who will discuss, among other issues, some of the challenges in the management of national unique identifiers. Thank you also to my dear colleague and friend Ivo Havinka, who will moderate this discussion here. And we will have finally a presentation of our Julian Cho here at UNSD about recommendations for moving forward on this topic and seeing some concrete proposals followed by a brief discussions. So I hope that this series today will, with this webinar series today, we will have gained a better understanding of the challenges, but also the opportunities of increased collaboration among regulatory authorities and national statistical offices. And the discussion today can contribute to continuing to this work on the identification of concrete ways to strengthen the legal registration of businesses and the management of unique identifiers for the improvement of statistical business registers. So a big thank you to all of you who have connected either early on or in the middle of your day or late in your day. I encourage you also to continue to be engaged, because this is, of course, an ongoing activity, and there will be further discussions, seminar, webinars, discussions. So please stay connected with us on this important work. I wish you a successful meeting, and I congratulate all of you of the success we already had thus far. So Julian, I understand I pass it now over to Monica, or is Stefano has joined us? I see you, Stefano.
Yes.
Now you are right there next to me on the screen. So
Okay.
Stefano, you can also add
Okay.
to this one.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to do my opening. I had some technical problem with my Wi-Fi, so sorry for the short delay. I will also welcome you as the chair of the UN Committee on Trade and Business. I also would like to emphasize some of the key points that will be discussed today. Of course, I mean, we represent the statistical community of official statisticians, so we have a very specific perspective in this project. I'm very happy that in this section we can hear from the perspective from other stakeholders. This is not only a statistical project, this is a multi-stakeholder project, and it is very important to hear the point of view of other stakeholders. And that's why, you know, I really support this initiative. I would like only to spend a couple of words about where official statistics is going, both at the national and the global level. We are increasing using administrative data, and we are increasing using new data sources in order to, you know, to have the capability to link, to integrate this data, it is very useful to have a unique identifier. Unique identifier is a very important information that allows to establish interoperability. Interoperability is exactly where official statistics is going. So we used to build our data infrastructure. We call our data infrastructure business register. This is our terminology, but essentially this is data infrastructure. The future is linking different data infrastructure, both at the national and at the global level. So the idea is that by converging from different stakeholders on the necessity to have a unique identifier, we are supporting the building of an integrated data infrastructure. So we are moving toward the future. Everyone can benefit for that. This is a win-win game. This means that by making all the data sources more interoperable between them, we reduce the burden on the respondent. So we can use data collected from other authority. So this is a benefit for citizens. There is a benefit also because we can use more data more easily. And last but not least, one thing which is very important for statisticians is to have the capability to track international operation of company. International operation of multinational enterprise has a double phase. One phase is a real operation, and the other phase is our financial operation. So if you want to profile global company in order to allocate the right value added in each country, the right GDP, also for tax authorities, so for many point of view, it is very interesting to have a global identifier because we can integrate financial and real information at the global level, and so we can have a very consistent figure on what's going on from different point of view. So all those motivations are very supporting the idea to have a unique identifier at the global level to build integrated data infrastructure and to do profiling at the best level possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano, for your opening remark, and thank you once again for Stefano and Stefano for your support in the work. And your support is very essential in order to carry the work forward. And thank you so much once again. And without further ado, now I'll pass the time to Monica and from the United Nations Committee of International Trade Law, and who will chair the session. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julian, and also thank you, Stefano and Stefan, for your opening remarks that provided a very good insight of the past and the current webinar and the importance of unique identifiers. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants. Greetings from Vienna in Austria, not so cold as New York, luckily, but it was pretty cold in the past few weeks. Today we are benefited from a very nice sun. As already anticipated by in Stefan's opening remarks, the topic of the first panel, I'm really glad to share this panel with three renowned experts on statistics and data. The panel will look at two different, let's say, sets of topics. The first one is going to be kind of summary, wrap up of the first two webinars. And the second part of the panel, the second and the third interventions will look more at unique identifier in the perspective of two different areas. So this already shows how unique identifiers are kind of a cross-cutting, across-the-board topic. Without further ado, I'm introducing our first panelist, our first speaker, Mr. Hank Hermans. Hank is the chair of the task team on Statistical Business Register. Is also the director economic statistics at the Netherlands, and his main portfolio covers the innovation of input for statistical processes and the coordination of cross-border dependencies with economic and business statistics processes. Hank is the Dutch representative in the Business Statistics Directors Group in Europe. And in the UN, in the big UN family, he's a member of the Bureau of the Committee of Experts in Business, Trade and Statistics, and is chairing the task team on statistical business registers. And one of the catching milestones that have been achievement is the development of the statistical business register maturity model. Anke is also the current chair of the UN Wiesbaden Group on business registers and an international expert under the umbrella of the UN Statistical Commission, engaged in the further development of business registers. Anke, the floor is yours. Please try to stick to 10, maximum 12 minutes in your presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that you are asking me, who has troubles with speaking fluently, but I try to do as best as I can. And it will be hard because the introduction was already made by Stefan, who gave a good overview of the last two webinars, and then Stefano also added something to that. So those who were there from the start will hear a couple of things for the second time. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it works immediately. Can you see the title of the presentation now? Yes, okay, I see the thumbs up. So, like Stefan has said, this is the last session of 3 webinars. And I wanted to give you a short recap of the first 2 webinars, starting with explaining the goal of the global initiative and then followed by the contents of the webinars. And I will end with an overview of the main takeaways that I found from these 2 webinars. The global initiative, you can see that as a result of a consultation process that has started in 2020, and it was going between UNSD, the UN Committee of Experts on Business and Trade Statistics, and the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, well known as GLIFE. And it was discussed at several meetings of the UNCEPS. UNCEPS stands for the Committee of Experts on Business and Trade Statistics, and this task team on statistical business registers. The global initiative on unique identifiers for businesses is an initiative aimed to strengthen the transparency on businesses in countries by improving their registration. Secondly, to improve the availability of unique businesses identifiers in administrative data sources in countries. The third one is to promote access and sharing of administrative data for statistical business registers, and also to demonstrate the importance and benefit of linking national identifiers with global identifiers, such as the LEI, the Legal Entity Identifier. The global initiative was brought to the UN Statistical Commission during its 54th session in March last year, and the Commission endorsed the global initiative on unique identifiers, supported also its main elements, and encouraged countries and relevant organizations to coordinate their activities in this area in an effort to provide a solid infrastructure for statistical business registers. So during the 54th session of the United Nations Statistical Commission, a side event was organized, and in that event, the need for solid and adequate registration of businesses was underlined, and the event elaborated on the increased possibilities and opportunities when having sound business registrations in place, together with the availability of unique identifiers. The organization of this webinar series is a direct result from this side event. And the main objectives that we have now in these webinar series is to create awareness of the global initiative and establish a collaborative environment for countries and international organizations to strengthen the registration systems in countries. We also aim to identify possible pilot projects to demonstrate the importance of a South registration system to improve the statistical business registers and the benefits of mapping to a global unique identifier. And they're used to jumpstart their national systems of unique business identifier. We also want to elaborate a work plan to further guide this initiative by adapting to the UN Legal Identity Agenda, to the business registration, and seeking synergies between the business registers and the civil registration registers. Next, I want to take a short look at the agenda that we had for the first two webinars. The first webinar, as you can see, was held on the 11th of October 2023, and the opening was also then being done by Stefan Schweinfest and by Stefano Manginello. And then we had 5 presentations focusing on why we have this initiative. We also looked at the similarities with civil registration. Then we had a presentation of Monica, who is now chairing this session, and followed by a presentation by Rico Dunn. And at last we had a presentation of the World Bank. The session concluded then by a roundtable discussion that was led by Ivo Havinga. You will see him also later in this webinar session. The second webinar was organized on the 7th of November 2023. And in this session, we started with focusing on business registers, not to be confused with the statistical business registers. And this session consisted of 5 presentations. I won't walk through them because I think it will be more interesting to see what the main takeaways were from those 2 sessions together. And first I want to start with looking to statistical business registers, because the urge for this initiative was raised because of the need for new information, and also important for understanding the drive forces behind phenomena like globalization, digitalization, but also climate and sustainability. In all of this, there is a crucial role for the statistical business register. And you can see, or you can look at a statistical business register in different ways, and you can see also that it has many roles. For example, it functions as a live register to provide a gateway between data from various input sources and statistical units, but it is also used for providing survey frames to provide populations of statistical and possibly administrative units at a fixed point in time. The statistical business register is also very important for linking information. And for example, to prevent from conducting surveys to collect necessary information and to minimize the administrative burden, linking of existing information or linking to new data sources is necessary for meeting new and emerging user needs in a swift and cost-efficient way. And presenters in the first session, they also show that the lack of a unique identifier in this sense is problematic. So that is also we want to focus in these webinar series of stimulating and promoting the use of a unique identifier. Secondly, I want to look at the business register. And like I said, this is something different than the statistical business register. We saw that improving the registration of businesses and the identity management system for businesses greatly facilitates the establishment and maintenance of a statistical business register. Because a business register, when available, is often being used as the main source for a statistical business register. And in the preparation of this webinar series, we had several discussions on how to gain interest for setting up business registrations in countries and where to start. And then the idea came up to look at the similarities with the approach for the civil registration and vital statistics. Civil registrations establishes the existence of a person under the law, and it is fundamental to granting legal identity. It is recognized as the ultimate source for production of comprehensive, regular, reliable vital statistics. It also provides a useful guidance where to start when setting up a business registration. So I definitely want to invite you to take a look at it, because you can find a lot on the pages of the United Nations. When setting up a business registration, one often starts with conducting a census. And in the second session, an example of Uganda was presented, where an establishment census was conducted. It resulted in 165,000 establishments that were identified and registered. A good lesson in this exercise was that a unique identifier would help in aggregating branches into enterprises, and it would certainly help in the use of admin data. But the biggest lesson they learned, and that is something I want to repeat today, is you need to start somewhere. So just start within and then see where you go. Having a unique identifier leads to multiple advantages. It has improved tax tracking for businesses that are operating across borders, reducing tax evasion, but also it's mainly useful for streaming legal business registration processes. Well, for the last thing, I want to move to the existence of the legal entity identifier, because until now the focus was mainly on the national level, but one can also find good guidance on global level, for example, with the lei. In the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, regulators worldwide acknowledged their inability to identify parties to transaction across markets, products, and regions. And therefore, in 2011, the G20 leaders they supported the creation of a global legal entity identifier, which uniquely identifies parties to financial transactions. In fact, the lei is a machine-readable 20-character alphanumeric code. And it was presented in the last session by Rico Dunn of Glive. Glive is the not-profit foundation which manages the lei, and it was founded by the Financial Stability Board. Glive is also closely involved in this global initiative. And the promotion of the use of the lei offers also new possibilities, because it also offers you not linking to only the national SBR, but also to global and international SBRs. And I think that would be a nice next step in understanding and describing a phenomenon like globalization, where this initiative from the beginning was started for. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and it gives you a global picture of what was discussed in the last two webinars. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Hank, and very much within the time limit. It's that's the beauty of interacting with colleagues who are dealing with numbers. Compared to lawyers like me, we like talk and talk and talk, and we lose track of times. You always have this very clear in mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for this. Thanks for actually showing us the main takeaways, and reminding us of the connection between the business registries and statistical business registries, and also to highlight this connection with civil registration. Without further ado, I'm now moving to the first of the two presentations, will bring us back into unique identifiers from the perspective this time of the central bank, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Mr. Robert Kirschner. I hope I'm pronouncing the surname in a correct way. Robert is the Deputy Director General of the Directorate General Data and Statistics at the Deutsche Bundesbank, and is also chair of the European Committee for Monetary, Financial and Balance of Payment Statistics, and the chair of the European Committee of Central Balance Sheet Data Offices. Again, an average of 10-12 minutes for this presentation, and we're very happy to listen to you, Robert.
Many thanks, Monica. It's really a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be invited to this event and to present the work of the CMFB on fostering the LEI as a unique identifier of financial and non-financial companies for statistical purposes. So today I'm presenting in my role as CMFB chair and not purely from a Bundesbank's point of view. So if you would like to turn around, then I say a few words on the outline. So I will start by shortly describing to you what is a CMFB, and then I will also very shortly present the CMFB work on statistical registers and the LEI, which started in 2015, but mainly to focus on the most recent CMFB opinion on the LEI in 2023 and what that is. So on the next page, in a nutshell, the CMFB is a European Committee on Monetary, Financial and Balance of Payment Statistics. And as mentioned, it was founded more than 30 years ago in 1991. The CMFB is the operational platform for cross-cutting and transversal issues between the European statistical systems, that's the national statistical offices and Eurostat, and the European system of central banks. It has an advisory role and assists the European Commission in drawing up and implementing statistical work programs. On the next page, you see how the CMFB looks like. So you can see there are many nice colleagues and it's a big group. More structured, that's on the next slide, we can see that the CMFB consists in total of more than 80 member institutions. So we have from the national central banks, the statistical directorates from the Eurosystem, but also outside the Eurosystem, but inside the EU, EFTA countries, additional members, from the national statistical institutes, from the European Union, from EFTA countries, member countries, etc. And also we have international organizations with economic statistics tasks as observers like the UNECE, the IMF, the OECD, and the BIS. So on the next page, we see a little bit that the work of the CMFB started has in 2015. Why? So the consistency of monetary, financial and balance of payment statistics is at the core of CMFB tasks, affecting statistics from both the European statistical system and the European system of central banks, in particular financial and non-financial national accounts and balance of payments. As we know and as you have mentioned, in a global economy there is an important degree of interconnectedness among legal units, both within the financial sector and between the financial sector and the non-financial sector. So to explore this interconnectedness and to foster consistency when linking financial and non-financial data, it is key on the one side to identify all legal units by a unique identifier that can be recognized not only at the level of the European Union but also worldwide, and on the other side to know how these entities are interlinked. I will not describe the individual steps that the committee did and which were summarized on the next two slides, which will be shared, I guess, perhaps afterwards. So for the reason of time, I will directly go to the formal CMFB opinion on slide 9. This formal CMFB opinion consists on certain parts. One slide before. Great. And I think slide number 9 should be one slide before again. Perfect. Next slide, and then we've got it. Sorry for the confusion, but now we have it. Perfect. So let us remember, CMFB is a big body of many institutions. And so from a legal point of view, this committee has the right to express opinion on its own initiatives on any questions relating to those statistics that are of common concern to the European Commission and national statistical authorities on the one hand, and the ECB and national central banks on the other hand. In its execution of its tasks, the committee can also give views to all interested parties. And with regard to the opinion that I will talk about, this opinion has been issued by the request of the CMFB and has been adopted with a very large majority, more than of 90% of votes of the opinions mentioned. So the CMFB is a body which really votes to get a view. So part of the opinion, as we'll see on the next slide, are the reasons why the CMFB expresses an opinion, and the reasons comes before the opinion, and I will close then directly with the opinion on the last slide. So let's just have a look why we have expressed an opinion. So extending the use of the LEI will produce many benefits to statisticians, we have seen. They would be able to profile multinational groups independently of their scope, European and worldwide, and therefore making the world of large case units, for example, easier. Large case units are a European endeavor to align the statistical results of big enterprise groups in different countries and in different statistics. So it's a big step forward with regard to statistical consistency. In addition, identifying partners uniquely would help statisticians to reduce asymmetries between countries in international trade and balance of payment statistics. Last but not least, a global common identifier is crucial for the development of granular statistics and contributes to reducing response burden. We will see on the next slide that the LEI can also help to address a number of EU policies. For example, the European Systemic Risk Board recognized in 2021 that the degree of interconnectedness among legal units, both within the financial sector and between the financial and non-financial sector, needs to be monitored to better ensure financial stability in order to measure and manage the risk of contagion among entities, sectors, and countries. And here the point that was also mentioned before in the presentation, integrating data sets is an important statistical task in this regard, and the LEI plays a pivotal role in the global strategy on microdata. It makes it much easier to combine different databases, since legal entities in their various roles, we have to say they can be reporting agencies in one data bank, creditors in another, debtor in another database, security issuers, investor protection providers, etc., that really underlines this important. And we have mentioned some examples on the at the bottom of this slide. On the next slide, let me also mention the example that supporting the collection of data on sustainable finance is another potential use case for the LEI. Centrally harmonized access to databases with relevant information on each company's degree of sustainability and its exposures to climate risk would be beneficial for supporting the development of sustainable finance and ensuring investor protection by enabling easy access to the financial and environmental, social, and governance metrics describing the company. Such data would enable supply chain to be tracked, and this would make it possible to estimate emissions across entire supply chains. In turn, it would help to monitor the use of the procedure of green bonds, making green labels more reliable and thus lower the reputational risk of greenwashing in green bond market. So with the help of a broader coverage of the LEI, statistics would be in a much better situation to provide relevant and timely data for economic and policy decision makers. On the next page, we see that for statistics, as we have clearly mentioned, that the LEI is a public good. And as a consequence of broader use cases and greater coverage of the LEI, a higher quality of the LEI will be achieved more or less automatically. However, the use of the LEI, in particular in medium and small non-financial companies, is not as extensive as the cost-benefit analysis is less straightforward for these companies, we have to say. Indeed, if the companies are not legally obliged, they do not perceive individually benefits that justifies having this identifier in addition to national identifiers, which can be used for administrative domestic transactions. In addition, the business model for the issuance and renewals of the LEI codes, which companies have to front a fee for having a code, is perceived as too costly for many companies. So without any adjustment to the GLIFE business model, no fundamental change to the low use of the LEI by medium and small non-financial companies are to be expected. On the next page, close before finalizing the presentation, we can also say that in order to minimize the cost for the companies, there is a need for thinking of different non-exclusive models, notably for the non-financial small and medium-sized enterprises. And here are good ideas on the way. For example, as mentioned under B, the European Systemic Risk Board suggested a system of cost-free LEI issuance and renewals for European enterprises as a byproduct of official registration that could be developed to keep them on an equal footing level of competitiveness with non-European enterprises. And the LEI, for example, can also be integrated in mandatory data covered by the European Company Law Directive. So the maximum benefit of the LEI for statistical community and, by extension, for the society as a whole can only be achieved when its use is as broad as possible, especially by increasing coverage worldwide, so that the full global purpose of the LEI will be achieved. So, to conclude, against this background, this large committee has agreed to the following opinion. The CMFB encourages all initiatives which help to broaden the coverage and use cases of the LEI, minimizing or even eliminating the cost of issuance and renewals for European companies. The CMFB has asked the European Commission to take into account the statistical usefulness of a broader LEI coverage when reporting on whether or not to make the LEI mandatory for a wider range of legal entities across the EU, and this is on the agenda, for example, for the European Commission to think about it. The CMFB encourages a global use of the LEI through various international fora in the attempt to extend the benefits of the LEI implementation for statistical purposes beyond the EU boundaries, like hopefully the event today and the conclusions. So this opinion has been published on the CMFB website and sent to the European Commission, Eurostat, the Directorate General for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union, the Directorate General for Justice and Consumers, to the ECB and to the Regulatory Oversight Committee. It's an advisory role, so we stay with these advice. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Robert. First of all, for this very straight to the point presentation, detailed, but at the same time very, very clear, for guiding me, for permitting me as a EU citizen to discover another brick in the very complex construction of the EU, because I didn't know about the existence of the committee. And for highlighting the importance of unique identifiers that in order to link financial and non-financial data, and also to stress the opinion of the committee in try to use all possible fora, all possible avenues and ways to promote the use of a legal identifier that permits, can I say, a dialogue, interaction, and sharing information across the globe. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we are moving to the last presentation for the panel. And again, we are looking at the role of unique identifiers from the perspective of IMF. And I'm certainly more familiar with IMF than with the committee that Robert was introducing in his presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce to the audience Mr. Jim Tebrake. Jim is the current Deputy Director of the Statistics Department at the International Monetary Fund, IMF. His main responsibilities include overseeing the fund's new Data Gaps Initiative, climate change statistic programs, and also oversight for the economic and environmental accounting frameworks. Jim's current research includes developing improved frameworks and methods to account for financial innovation, informal economy, globalization, digitalization, well-being, and sustainability. The floor for the next 12 minutes is all yours, Jim. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Hopefully you can hear me and see my screen. So I'll just do a check. Yeah, great. Well, it certainly is a privilege to be here and to join in this discussion. And yeah, it's, I think, a really great initiative. A lot of what I'm going to say is going to reinforce a lot of what we've already heard, both in the opening remarks and in Hank and Robert's interventions. I will reinforce that by way of an example. So I'm going to take everybody through a few examples of where unique identifiers, globally unique identifiers, would be extremely helpful. Just go. So the examples I'm going to take are from our statistics capacity development program at the IMF, where we engage with countries along a number of different statistical areas, as well as make reference to the G20 Data Gaps Initiative, phase 3, where we also are doing some work around data sharing and data access. And of course, unique identifiers would greatly support that work. So what type of statistical capacity development does the IMF do? So before I get into the examples, just give you a very broad overview of what the work that we do and the sample from which I'm drawing these examples. So we do two types of capacity development: on the technical assistance side, on the training side. That technical assistance is across on the economic statistics side, so national accounts prices. It is balance payments, government finance statistics, monetary and financial statistics. We deliver both in-country technical assistance, where people go to the country, work with the statistical agency to address a specific need. We also develop online learning tools that became quite popular over the last number of years as many places needed to shut down due to the COVID pandemic. So it's quite a broad program that we deliver. In terms of what we call missions or activities that we deliver in fiscal year 23, which is actually for most people calendar year 22. We do things a little bit odd at the IMF regarding our fiscal year. We engaged in 456 missions. Now in fiscal year 24, which is essentially the year that's just ending for us this April, that went up to over 700 activities in the year. The majority of the activities take place in Africa, Asia Pacific, and as I mentioned, a lot of the activities are around national accounts and price statistics, government finance statistics, a little bit less so on the external or the balance payment statistics and the monetary and financial statistics. So it's a huge program that we have, and what we find, and so with each one of these technical assistance missions, a report is written at the end. And if you go through those reports, I would say at least every other report refers to the need for government agencies within the country to share information, to share data, to work together, to cooperate, because things like running surveys are expensive. So many statistical agencies in these countries are looking for ways to use more and more administrative data in their statistical programs. And just to give you an idea of the need of the move to administrative data, or why countries are thinking this way, is because if you look at the benchmark reference year for national accounts across many of the countries, their last benchmarking of their national accounts, so the last time they really got really good comprehensive economic data looking at businesses within their country, how those businesses are operating, the value added of those businesses, sometimes it's 10 years old or greater than 10 years old. So they've really started to lose track of the structure of the economy. And the reason why they've done that is because in the past, to develop these benchmark estimates, they would stand up and need to stand up very expensive surveys, where they would go out and they would survey the population. Before they survey their business population, they would actually need to establish a business register or a listing, probably not even a register, but a listing of businesses, because they didn't maintain one on an ongoing basis. So you can see how this initiative of establishing these benchmarks is extremely expensive, extremely time consuming. And if they don't have things like unique business identifiers, that statistical infrastructure that was talked about at the beginning of this session, that job is even harder, even more resource intensive, and in some cases almost impossible for the statistical agencies to do. So what we've seen in terms of evolving in their capacity development program is that more and more countries recognizing that for cost reasons, for respondent reasons, they need to move away from surveys, and they need to move towards using administrative data, even for things like their benchmark national accounts estimates. And what we're seeing, and the type of requests that we're seeing coming through our capacity development program, is assistance in processing and coding administrative data. But on that, and it was mentioned earlier, linking administrative data together. We see a lot more requests just asking countries to help build statistical business registers, maintain business registers. We still get requests for collecting and processing data, certainly requests to support development of memorandums of understanding to assure access across administrative data. So just want to reinforce the point that this move to administrative data is global, and many countries are seeing the benefits of this, and that with that move, things like identifiers and business identifiers becomes critically important for unlocking the potential of these data. And I'll get into a little bit later, I'll get into reasons why. But that was one example that I wanted to share with you, is that we deliver a lot of data, a lot of technical assistance in the national accounts to build these benchmark estimates, if you would. And certainly use of a unique identifier would facilitate that within countries. The other area where we're seeing increasing demand for support is on develop high frequency indicators. So many countries only have an annual national accounts program, annual balance of payments program. Coming through COVID, there's a lot of demand to increase the frequency of those statistics, whether it's a quarterly national accounts program or just some monthly indicator of economic activity that policymakers can use to better track the business cycle. And we've provided support in this area to a number of countries such as the Maldives, Uganda, Mauritania over the last number of years. Unfortunately, for a country to stand up a high frequency indicator program, it's quite expensive, especially if they're considering using survey data. So much of our support is working with countries to obtain administrative data that can be used to produce monthly indicators. This might be things like monthly value-added tax information, could be things like building permit information, could be certain agricultural statistics that are produced by the agricultural authority in the country on a monthly basis, could be some social security information data as well. And there's a couple of things that need to be done when you're setting up these monthly indicators. Oftentimes you have to link these files together in order to get a comprehensive story, but also oftentimes you have to link these files back to things like the business register to be able to properly classify the units on this administrative data that you have. Sometimes you have to link it back to maybe some more benchmark information, but whatever way you want to discuss this, record linkage is a key component of this work that needs to be done. And again, greatly facilitated through the use of unique identifiers. And the last example that I'm going to maybe walk you through is some of the work that we're doing under the G20 Data Gaps Initiative. And I'm going to start this by saying that over the last couple of decades, at least since I was a very young economist, statistician working at Statistics Canada, things have changed quite dramatically. When I was working at Statistics Canada 30 years ago, where I started my career, it was actually pretty simple. We would design a survey, collect all the information that we wanted on that survey. We would survey the business and we would get all the information back. And we had full control over the entire statistical process because we determined what questions were going to be asked. We determined the design of the survey, and then we went out and collected the information. Well, things have changed quite a bit over the last number of years as more and more administrative data, private sector data, scanner data, website traffic data, Earth observation data, all kinds of different data are now available to the statistician. And so the statistician, I mean, that's good in the sense that there's more data available, but the statistician is no longer designing the form, if you would. They're no longer determining what's collected. They're receiving what's collected, but not really determining what's collected per se. So the situation actually now doesn't start with the question and the design. It starts with the data, and the statistician has to analyze that data. What does this data, what is this data? What questions can I answer with this data? And then they go through the design process, and it's somewhat of an iterative process. But through all of this, there is going to be a need to link data together. There's going to be a need to combine data, because each of these data sets that the statistician receives is somewhat one-dimensional. Yet the majority of the questions that we need to address are multidimensional. The only way we can address those multidimensional questions is by linking data. The only way we can link data is first by being able to get access to that data, by having the data stewards or the data owners of that data share that information across jurisdictions. And then following that, we can link the data. And again, that linkage is greatly facilitated by a unique identifier. So within the G20 Data Gaps Initiative, we have two recommendations, one focus on data access, one focusing on data sharing. So those kind of first steps that we need to undertake in order to obtain the data, be able to link it together. And what we envision and hope is that we can build this idea of a unique business identifier being one of the supporting blocks of these specific recommendations under the Data Gaps Initiative. Because while it is great to have access to the data, while it is great to have the sharing of the information, once you receive that data, if you don't have a way to link it together, really you just have one-dimensional data sets, and you can't respond to those much more comprehensive type questions that we're starting to see policymakers pose to the statistician. So I'm going to stop there, and probably went a little bit over time, so I apologize for that, but happy to answer any questions. And again, Hank and Robert, hopefully I did justice to your presentations, trying to reinforce some of the really good ideas that you brought about in that work. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Jim. It was very interesting. That's why I really didn't push for a quicker conclusion of the presentation. And actually, thank you for, first of all, for showing, the challenges that states have to face with sharing information or lack of information sharing, and the economic cost that the lack of an identifier can result in. But also what I personally take away is also one of your last slides about data, that nowadays many times the statistical process starts with the data and not with planning. So it just gives me the idea of the power that is in the data, that is embedded in data. With that, I thank you, the three of you, once more. Really interesting presentations. I'm not sure we have time for questions, so here I rely on the host, on Julian. We are in your hand.
Yeah, I think we can have some time of question and answer, because it's a great presentation, and I imagine there's many people who may have some question to the presenter. Maybe I will just open up the floor to see if there's any question to the plenary speakers. Maybe for me, I have one really is just a brief, because I from Robert and also from Jim, you also mentioned, from Robert, you mentioned that now the opinion is being taken up by the European Commission in order to have a discussion about. So I just want to see maybe on that side, and then maybe do you have any maybe can advise us on the process of whether maybe how the discussion process is going on from the European Commission with regard to the treatment of this opinion? And my question to Jim is about the G20 initiative, and we're grateful that you also mentioned the G20 data gap initiative, and in particular on recommendation and 13 and 14. So my question is whether maybe any role for the unique identifier for business can also be featured in either of the recommendation, or maybe a kind of a work in order to maybe to make it more visible in a kind of official statement. So this is my question to Robert and also to Jim.
Thanks for the question. So for the time being, I would like to say the CMFB opinion is out not too long ago. So therefore it is relatively fresh, and we are not sure how much the European Commission will take it into account, but at least they're informed on the benefits in statistics. What I've learned in the CMFB discussions is that very often when we talk with policymakers, just for bringing in an additional identifier which has a global perspective, let me say only for statistical purposes, might be relatively difficult. So what I think is one of the main problems that we are facing with is really to find also very good use cases in practical implementation, which are used all over the world, like Jim has presented. And I think the more use cases of internationally identifiers we have, the easier will it become to start a discussion on a national or European level, also for the benefits of statistics. But I think it is very critical to have enough use cases in each jurisdiction to do that. And personally, let me say, I'm also convinced, and here I would really promote an international initiative on any kind of identifier. If we think about the financial sector and how easily things spread out, for example, from Lehman over certain securities to institutions all over the world, then I would like to say it is really important that we can benefit from one identifier globally in the long-term perspective. And I would really encourage all kind of work which is doing to select all these kind of examples, that we can use it as good guiding examples to convince decision makers on the jurisdiction level. Thank you.
Yeah, and very briefly, just to piggyback a little bit on what Robert said, because I agree 100% about, in order to get take up, we really need to build a business case and use case and present that to the range of stakeholders within a country and globally in terms of the benefit that this will bring to them. And that's, I think, where we can leverage the G20 Data Gaps Initiative. So I think there is an opportunity in the G20 Data Gaps Initiative to bring this work in and to provide those use cases and those business cases, and to send that messaging back to the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, indicating that this is important and this has great benefits, not just for the statistical system, but for things like taxation systems, things like policy building in different areas, industrial policy building across the board. So certainly following this meeting, I think it's important that we link up the G20 Data Gaps Initiative with this initiative and see how we can be able to reinforce the messaging moving forward. Thanks.
If there are no questions from the floor, from the audience, and I do have a question for Hank. I don't see any questions on my chat, but I'm not sure if I'm clicking on the right field. Colleagues from UNDESA? Okay, then I will move on with my question for Hank. Hank, you talk in your presentation of takeaways, and you reminded us of the takeaways from the webinar and global takeaways. But in terms of the Dutch situation, the Dutch experience, what are the main takeaways?
Thank you very much, Monica. That is a good question. When I look at the main takeaways, I could not agree more with the conclusion that the unique identifier is very helpful. I cannot think of a research project that we are doing without using microdata linking. Linking of information is key, and that is something that we also heard in the presentation of Robert, but also in the presentation of Tim. In the Netherlands, we also profit a lot from our network of basic registers, like the registers on income, real estate, addresses, and buildings. On the trade register, and also there the unique identifier plays a very important role. We also store the lei in our business register, but up until now we do not actively use the lei. But I think it has a great potential, like Robert was also pointing out. It will make the work in the large case unit a lot easier, and it also can help us in reducing the asymmetries. So I think the use of a lei, we could benefit all from that. And last, I would also come back to some things that Tim showed it, because he said that sharing data is becoming more important each day, and I could not agree more with that. We are moving to administrative data, he said, at a global level, and I agree also with that. But what I also liked is what he said about we need to learn to work in a different way, and he had a nice picture of doing so. And the only thing that I was thinking, because we have a certain same thing going on in the Netherlands, is that we change our way of thinking. In the past, we were used to ask for exact data that we want, but we know that the administrative burden is going sky high then, and our questionnaires are becoming too long. So what we now do is we ask what they have. And if they have something that is not completely what we need to have, then we transform the data. And that is something that could also maybe fit in the picture that Tim was showing, because I think transforming data into the way you want to have it could also be an important aspect of making a lot of data that is available usable. So I think we have heard many good lessons from today, and I hope it also triggers countries to work on business registrations, but also important to work on unique identifiers. Thank you.
Thank you, Henk. And with this, I think is a perfect conclusion for this first panel. I see no hands up in the chat or questions. So thank you again. And back to you, Julian, for the second part of the webinar.
Now I will now pass the time to Ivo Havinger, and Ivo, he's going to moderate the session. Ivo, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Julian. And I am pleased that I can stand on the shoulders of giants. There was great presentations from Robert and Jim and Hank, and reflecting the views from the statistical community, but from very important institutions like the Commission, but also the countries like Hank representing Statistics Netherlands, and Robert the Bundesbank in Germany. All come to the same sort of outcome which we were looking for, because this was a series of 3 seminars or webinars. This is the last one, in which we actually explore the request from the Statistical Commission, which is, as you know, the EPIC institution for the statistical community, to see whether we could launch a global initiative on unique business identifiers, and they all make a very strong case. I think that, you know, joining hands on these matters is an opportune activity. There's a lot of evidence out there about the importance. We talked about data integration. The start from data rather than the surveys and censuses makes it also very necessary to use the unique identifier. The good thing, building on these giants, having said that from the statistical sort of perspective, and they did that eloquently, is also to build further on these different perspectives on these unique identifiers by bringing in the private sector and also those that work in these private sector aspects. So I would like to indicate that we can further discuss the use of unique identifiers, particularly the global identifier for instance, access to capital market, the request from the investment community to get more insights into the ownership structures of enterprises to see where they can invest. It is also about not only the integration of the developed economies, it's very much also integrating the developing economies in this, and we'll hear much more about these experiences there to advance that understanding of how we can actually integrate much better in the supply chain, for instance, also the developing world into these aspects, also for international investment purposes, capital market purposes, but also as we talk about climate change a lot, about ESG markets and so on, that we need to get a better insight. And there also the global identifier can play an important role. Now, I will not give away all these matters, but I would just like to indicate to the participants that we now try to broaden this, while at the same time we also have UNSD Statistics Division elaborating further insights on their practices in the use of administrative data. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel, and the panel will consist of 4 speakers. We have our dear colleague and friend Vibeke Nielsen. She has a distinguished career, starting in Statistics Norway, but now leading major programs at Statistics Division around administrative data. She has a collaborative in many countries that brings together these experiences. So as there was a call of bringing these use cases together, I think Vibeke is supposed to girl in this environment that does a lot of work in this area, but she also works on other initiatives like the Data Now initiatives, and she is also part of the capacity building program more broadly, and particularly also a program on bringing together the global statistical institutes in working together on a capacity building program. So welcome, Vibeke. Gerard Hartzing, I'm very pleased to have him on board. Gerard, welcome. Hi, and a fellow Dutchman. Always easy for me to talk Dutch to him, but I will not do it now. And because I'm also Dutch, as you hear from my accent. Gerard has a distinguished career in many different fronts. He is presently the chair of the International Chamber of Commerce, particularly on the initiative on digital standards, but he is also advisor to the ICC in the Netherlands and also the International Board in Paris. He has a distinguished background and as previous chairman of the GLIFE Foundation, which is the institute that advances the legal identity identifier. He is board member in many different boards. So welcome, Gerard, and we look forward to your intervention. I'm very pleased also to introduce Dobro Christoph and Numa Freira. Dobro and Numa, distinguished colleagues from the World Bank and the International Financial Corporation. Between them, I read and I talked with them. They have about 130 country experiences between them on business regulatory environment. So, you know, these are extremely valuable experts that can talk about the business regulatory environment, but also particularly around business registers. Each will come with their own perspective. One looks more from the legal institutional side and one more from the e-government side. But, you know, among them, between the two of them, they have many sort of more insights in the business regulatory environment. So it's very important to understand that private sector perspective and how the bank sees these initiatives going forward. So I will not go in further detail in reading out their full CVs to save time, but I'm sure you find them all on LinkedIn because they are seasoned experts in their area and well-known internationally in their areas of expertise. I would like to start off the panel with a couple of questions, which is, and I've shared that with them in advance, so they are aware of these questions, but I don't want them to feel that they are limited to these questions. But for the participants, just contextually to get an idea of what the scope of the conversation will be about, and I would like to organize it in 2 rounds. I think we have maybe up to about 9 o'clock, so let's say about 50 minutes. So we have some time to have a dialogue. So I would like the panelists to do it in 2 parts in terms of their intervention, so that they can also have a conversation among themselves. Now, the questions that I have are rather straightforward. We would like to look at the challenges, legally, institutionally, technically, methodologically, IT side, in terms of advancing unique identifiers at the national level. The second question is, are there similar challenges in linking these national identifiers of businesses in the registries, which is more about the legal sort of institutional registration of businesses? Can we link, and how easily is to link it to the global identifier? That is an important step that we want to promote, has been indicated also by Robert and by Jim, the importance of that global number to be unique, to allow us to better link data. As we are from the statistical community, we also very interested, of course, about the access of that administrative data on businesses for statistical purposes. So there's a statistical purpose, and we have, Jim very eloquently elaborated why this is so important to have that unique identifier and the global identifier for data integration. And then finally, I would like to ask the panelists to reflect on where can the global initiative, as it's been envisioned by the statistical community, actually contribute to advancing the unique identifiers at the national level, but also at the national level in terms of linking it to the global identifier. So that is the context. In terms of the panel, I have agreed that we do it in certain order. Mr. Hatzing will start off, then I will turn to Vibeke, and then I'll turn to Dobro, and then I talk to Numa. In that order, we will take it forward, and hopefully in 2 rounds we can come back. With that, I turn to Gerard. Gerard, can I invite you to make your intervention? And thank you for being available in your busy time. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation on behalf of International Chamber of Commerce. We believe that the global initiative on a unique global identifier for business is very important for the ICC membership. It's relevant maybe for you to know that ICC is already an observer since Jan 2017 of the UN General Assembly. So there is some sort of link with cooperation model. For those who are not aware what ICC is all about, ICC has 45 million corporate members in 170 countries. The focus of ICC that exists a bit over 100 years already is making it easier to trade internationally. It operates with national committees. The members of them are mainly exporters, importers, and their service providers such as banks, logistical firms, also legal firms, and they have globally 12 policy committees, being a banking policy committee, but also custom and trade, taking care of more the financial part of the international supply chain, such as trade finance, but also the logistical part. ICC delivers a lot of practical tools. You may have heard of Incoterms coming from ICC, model contracts for exporters, importers, certificates of origin, many more, but also the ICC Identity Management Guide that was made available in 2020. That was also the time we started a program globally. It is called ICC Digital Standards Initiative. And what is the purpose? Many trade documents, there are about 40, such as bill of lading, letters of credit, and many more, are still paper-based. That has to do, in a lot of cases, with legal issues and also because of business practices. So the ambition is of all relevant industry associations to make that world more digital. That will deliver more efficiency, but also more quality over time. The 2 hurdles we face are legislation, and second, the common view on common data standards. And that's why we created 2 sub-programs and supported by 2 industry advisory boards, the legal Reform Advisory Board. Their focus is on legislation, in particular on the model law on transferable records of 2017 of UN CITRAL. And second, the board I'm chairing is focusing on data standard for cross-border paperless trade. We already delivered 4 concrete documents. The last one is not yet published. Standards toolkits for cross-border paperless trade, together with the World Trade Organization, Trust in Trade, that addresses also the verifiable trust for the logistical and the financial. So it's not only a number, the business identifier, it should also be verifiable. We already delivered the first report on key trade documents and data elements, and we are working now on a final report. The final report is planned to be published this quarter. What the conclusions so far are: no new data standards are needed. We have enough data standards. The problem is we don't use, whatever choice we make over time, the same data standard, and that creates a lot of problems. Second, The public sector for B2G processes and the private sector for B2B processes do not use the same technical data standard for identification of businesses. That is one of the problems we face. All 40 trade documents do have a general part and a specific part. And in the general part, you see that the rule books of those trade documents do not prescribe the same or do not recommend the same data standards for identification of business. And the identifier of a business exporters and importers is imported as data connector for the end-to-end processes in the supply chain from a logistical perspective, but also from a payment perspective. Next point, my legal entities, of course, they are based on a legal system, and all countries have multiple legal forms, often part of a corporate structure based on where IFRS or US GAAP is used. They are all embedded in business registers, but the business registers use national rules, use the national language, use national technical identifier standards, have national access rules, services, and also the funding is quite different for the business unit. So that creates challenges really for the global businesses involved in the international supply chain. It also creates a lot of problems for cross-border payments. It is also challenging for the capital markets for the funding of banks that need other markets to fund, for instance, the trade finance business. And of course, it creates also problems for the public sector, custom tax supervisors, overseas. I've seen a lot of these practical problems they face over time. The G20 already recognized this point. I will not repeat what was said already on the CLIVE program, but it is clear that the CLIVE program was initiated by the G20. The FSB in the end was mandated to take the next step. It resulted in the ROC with so far 65 regulators and 19 observers such as OECD, IMF, the BIS, in particular the statistical part of the BIS. And they created the second organization, the foundation in Switzerland, CLIVE, not-for-profit, that has as a task manage the network of lay issuers to provide trusted services and open, reliable data for unique legal entity identification worldwide. It is for B2G, but also B2B. That's in the statutes based on the international ISO standard 7442. All the services are free of charge, and it is important from a global perspective. The services are available in 14 languages of the G20. The G20 has also taken a second important position, and that had to do with enhancing cross-border payments. In 2021, the FSB created a G20 roadmap, and in particular with 19 building blocks. In particular, building block 16 establish unique identifier for the businesses, but also for natural persons globally is mentioned in the roadmap. And the lay is mentioned as the identifier for the businesses, mentioning also as the global digital unique identifier for cross-border payments, plus potentially other financial transactions. The reality is that the majority of banks that are active in the world for cross-border business, they already have their lay and many of their subsidiaries. The problem is so far that not yet all exporters and importers do already have an LEI. I'd like to address one specific point. If you analyze all entity legal forms, as I mentioned, in the Netherlands 20, in France over 200, basically for exporters and importers and their banks, only 2 or 3 per jurisdictions are relevant. So the idea to have an LEI for all legal entities around the world is a nice idea, but from an ICC perspective, exporters, importers, and their service providers, being banks, being logistical firms, so all 3,800 entity legal forms is not so relevant from an ICC perspective, but definitely for the banks and exporters and importers. So we have to review all legal forms which are really relevant for the international business and find out if it would not be possible to add the lei to those parts of the business registers. The business register were created, as I mentioned already, for domestic purposes, tax, protection of creditors, and there are many models of business registers. An overview is available that was mandated by the ROC of the CLIVE, which takes care of oversight, but also of policy making. There are, according to, with their permission, 1,038 registration authorities. So could we seduce those registers to take care of the 2 or 3 entity legal forms to map the unique business identifier, the lei, to all those legal entities? It will solve a lot of problems in the supply chain and for the logistical part, but also for the financial part. And based on my experience, it will solve many problems also in the capital markets and money markets cross-border. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gerard. Very clear reflection on the challenges, but also coming up with directions of solutions and pathways. So I appreciate that opening. Maybe the others could react on that suggestion. I would like to move on immediately to give us more time. Vibeke Nielsen from United Nations Statistics Division. I already introduced you. Welcome, and thank you for being available. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo, and thank you for inviting me to join this very interesting discussion. As you were saying, Ivo, when you introduced me, you mentioned the collaborative on administrative data, where I have a key role as a secretariat for that collaborative. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a group that we established around 3 years ago now, where we try to focus on the use of administrative data sources by statistics offices and by the statistics community to produce statistics. And we do it across the board, across the thematic areas. It includes the business side, it includes the social side, it includes all kinds of administrative data sources that can be used for statistics. And we're trying to have a holistic view on the common challenges that statistics offices are facing in getting access to, in making use of and producing statistics based on those administrative data sources. And we currently have a community, I think, of around 30 countries from all around the world, and also many international and regional agencies. I can put a link to the collaborative in the chat later on for those of you who are interested. And in those discussions that we're having, because we're focusing a lot on experience exchange and learning and development of practical tools, what many countries have highlighted, and many of the partners also have highlighted, is the need and the benefits of unique identifiers. So I think this is something that has a lot of global interest at the moment, and there's a lot of push from the statistics community to move in this direction. So I think what you're doing and the work that is going on in this sector is really interesting and important. You also mentioned that I have a background from Norway. I worked for Statistics Norway for 12 years, most of that time also in capacity development. As a Norwegian, I'm used to unique identifiers. I think my whole life there have been unique identifiers for population, for businesses and addresses that really link everything together. I think 90% of statistics in Norway is based on on administrative data sources and basically the use of unique identifiers. So we see how easy things flow when you have it, how simple things are. And I've worked internationally also on supporting other countries in the use of unique identifiers. And something that I've heard come up a lot is how they gathered traction to use unique identifiers in Norway back in the 70s, where the private banks were really a key factor to introduce the unique identifier. They said, you know, this is something that is really beneficial for us. We get a better overview of the businesses. It's clearer to us. We feel more confident in this context rather than businesses just giving us random information. And I think that is a key to some of the points that I in general want to make. Finding partners for the NSO, to find partners that can push for this together with them, because just making the point that we need it for better statistics is not sufficient. And I've also seen this when I've worked in countries. I won't name the name of the countries, but I worked with several countries, both in Asia and in Africa, while I was still with Statistics Norway and also now with Statistics Division. Back with Statistics Norway, we traveled to countries jointly with the National Business Register Agency to kind of bring the two different perspectives. And we had a lot of positive momentum, but I think it was in very few countries that we actually succeeded. And I think to mention some of the challenges, I think that is important, and I'm glad you asked the question, because the lack of knowledge is, of course, one thing, and that we can help with guidance and materials. Silos are another big challenge. The lack of integration, the lack of collaboration, the lack of being used to working together, and the lack of trust in that context, and the interest in keeping your own bits to yourself. But I think also in that context, the lack of clear decision making by government officials to move from what they have to a system of unique identifiers, not wanting to make decision on which of the current identifiers to use or what system to take. I've also seen in some countries that corruption is a hurdle. The not wanting transparency. We got very far in one country. In the end, one of the agency didn't want to cooperate, and while it wasn't said clearly, there was an under element there of not wanting the transparency because it wouldn't lead them to get the same amount of funds under the table that they had been doing so far. I think another factor that becomes very, very important in especially the low resource countries and in countries where you have a large informal economy, not necessarily a black economy, but an informal economy with many small businesses, is how you actually get all the businesses to get these unique identifiers. Of course, I very much agree with what colleagues said earlier on starting somewhere. I think that really is something to keep in mind, but we also need to think about what do we do with all these small entities if they don't as such register to begin with. How do we actually give them unique identifiers, and what is the benefit of them of getting it? And I think there we need to help create incentives to make that relevant, and I think there are different incentives that could be made, and that links me back really to the champions. How can we find champions that we can collaborate with? I mentioned the private banks in Norway that were substantial for this establishment of the unique identifier for businesses back in the 1970s. So I would try and push for that also in countries where unique identifiers don't exist yet. The private business or the sector themselves, kind of get them on board to push their own government to move forward on this if they see the value of it. And I think that's something I've seen in many countries, that the businesses actually want it themselves often because of some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, also the global aspect, what Gerard was saying, what others have been saying, also kind of push and work globally. But I think still a lot of the push needs to come at national level. And for this also, I heard Jim mention the need to work differently. I think we also need to work differently in terms of new partnerships for statistics offices to learn to engage with those partners that they don't traditionally talk with, find those opportunities. And that's where I think also we as a global community have a role to play. Capacity development should be about those elements as well, the soft elements and not only the technical elements. So I think that brings me back to the collaborative and administrative data. I've seen a lot of positive progress in Latin America. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. And we've also had some good momentum in other countries. So where you have tax agencies that are interested, I think that's a good starting point to collaborate with them, because they have an interest also in more transparency where it works out. And maybe also focus on a specific sector. I worked in a country where we focused on improving statistics on copper data. We had several agencies that came together and that where the tax agency pushed for more data integration and the use of a unique identifier. So back to allies and partnerships. And I think that's where I end my intervention for now. Thank you.
Great, Vibeke. Thank you for bringing that rich background and experience from you on this going forward. We will probably come back to some of these issues that you raised, which are very important. Now I would like to move on and go to Dobro. Dobro, welcome. Thank you for being available and share your wealth of knowledge in this particular area around business regulatory environment and business registry. Dobro, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ivo and Monica, for having me, and thanks a lot, colleagues. I think I got the easiest task. The first panel covered the European Union, OECD. The second panel between Gerard and Vibeke covered the developing world. So maybe I'll just summarize a little bit and use some of those to ask provocative questions and maybe try to find some solutions. First, just to put things in perspective as a context, the World Bank is amongst the biggest players in unique business identifiers across the world, because as we know, we're active in more than 150 countries. We provide lending, we provide money and technical assistance in the areas of business registration, legal reforms, institutional reforms, technology reforms. Together with the IMF as well, we are the biggest player in the financial sector reforms across the world. So we have a very big, very huge data, very big exposure and field experience outside of OECD and of course outside of G20. But of course we have also insights. So a couple of questions. Undoubtedly, the business identifier is crucial for the global economy, not only for statistics purposes, but also for the inclusion agenda. By inclusion, I mean demarginalization of excluded parts of the societies in the developing countries. We can talk about women, we can talk about youth, we can talk about ethnic minorities, we can talk about other marginal groups. We can talk about refugees. You know that there's currently around 20 active conflicts, or 20 countries in the world are affected by conflicts. So we have all these populations. So this is the first. Second, if we are to link this to access to finance and the green agenda, we should always keep in mind that unregistered companies or companies who don't have assigned a business registration number cannot access finance, cannot participate in value chains, and cannot go green because they don't exist legally. The green regulations can be imposed and complied with only for companies that comply with other regulations. If they don't comply with any regulations, including green regulations, they won't comply to any of these. Another point is that this is a great initiative. I think there is an overwhelming consensus around the room that we all support this initiative, and also in institutional capacity as well. However, the challenges in the developing world are very different from the challenges that exist in the OECD countries or in the G20 countries. And one question would be, let's say that we agree on global standards. Let's say we agree on methodology, we agree on a modus vivendi, if you wish, on modus operandi, legal reform, institutional reform, technological reform. And the question is, how would this be enforced in the field in developing countries. I'll give you one example with a specific country that is in the news now in the last week, Yemen. The country of Yemen, divided between the Houthis and the internationally recognized government. I'll give you a couple of numbers. In Yemen, the big Yemen, only 50% of the people have ID number. Only 5% of the companies or the firms or the businesses only 5% have business registration number. Only 5% of the men have a bank account, and only 1% of the women, 1% of the women have a bank account. So take the case of Yemen and take the case of Germany, or the case of Netherlands, or the case of Norway, or even the case of Bulgaria, where I'm from. But everything is registered, recorded, and all that. So take this case and take the Yemeni case and everything in between. I can say the same things about Libya. I can say the same things about Sudan. Those are public sources. Everything that we do in the World Bank is public. Those are published data. It's available everywhere. So I'm not not hesitant to mention the names of those countries. And then think how, after we agree on a certain model of reforms, how and what it would take us to implement those reforms. And let's say, try to bring Yemen, for lack of a better example, into the global economy. And also keep in mind that when the Gucci brand went bankrupt, it was bought by Yemeni businessmen or Yemeni investors in New York City. It's on Netflix and it's documented. So think between the 99% excluded Yemenis in Yemen or Yemeni firms, 95% excluded, and the 0.0% Yemeni investor in the United States who bought, actually we have Yemeni billionaires here in the United States, right? So this is one big issue that I would like to put on the table. So it goes beyond statistics needs. It goes beyond the needs of the banks, the logistic companies, and the insurance companies. It goes to the issue of integration on a global level, but also inclusion and demarginalization on national level. In terms of some lessons from the field, I would like to throw a couple of notions around. The first notion is the false bottom. What does the false bottom mean? We have a formal economy in each developing country, and we have a vast informal economy. The formal economy, the data comes from the business registry. The question is, how reliable is this business registry in X developing country? Not much. Second, the statistics offices in these developed countries, as also mentioned by Vibeke, many of them have unreliable data, or many of them have unfinished institutional mandate. So the unreliability of the business registry leads to unreliability of the statistics office. When they trade data or exchange data cross-border, very often this data might not be reliable. Second issue, we all have legal regimes, so we all have legal forms, corporate forms, and myself as a business lawyer, I'm very keen on that agenda. Unfortunately, in many of these developing countries, the legislature or the parliaments, the national assemblies, including the monarchies, the kings, some countries have monarchies, like example, the Gulf countries, and some others, are not very functional, which means that everything that we propose as a legal reform might take 10, 15, 20 years. Now, the legal reforms are crucial because they're linked to the institutional mandates of those organizations who are mandated to issue business identification numbers. Those are the usual suspects: the business registry, the tax registry, the social security registry, sometimes the municipal level registry, and very often the National Statistics Institute. For example, in the Eastern Bloc, as a legacy from the socialism, we have a statistics institute that was part of the business registration process. So myself, as a young lawyer, I used to register companies in 5 different institutions, the last being the BULSTAT, which means the Bulgarian Statistical Office. So I used to bring to my clients 5 business identification numbers. Those were later integrated only because of strong parliament and only because of strong push from the European Union. And this happened before our accession to the European Union. Now the question is, where is the European Union in Asia? Where is the European Union in Africa? Where is the European Union in Latin America? There is no such organization that pushes local governments to identify, integrate, and collapse these numbers into one final number. So that being said, we have then the competing institutional mandates. They're not competing, they're parallel, but each number comes with a fee. So removing the mandate, let's say, from 3 agencies and giving the mandate to the business registry, to this super organization that issues the unique business identifier, takes away money from the tax office, from the municipal office, from the social statistics office, and from the social office, from the labor office, and sometimes from the statistics office itself. So very often our partners, the National Statistics Office, might be part of the problem because they also want to collect fees. The bureaucrats love fees. That's a simple truth. I used to be a bureaucrat in my government. I used to collect fees, and I loved it when I issued licenses from the Ministry of Economy for specific sectors. So this is the second big challenge here. The third one is to identify a champion. It comes to the question of incentives, motivation, incentives. This is very difficult, very, very difficult. And of course, the fifth one is the question of technology. It is very easy to happen technologically. My colleague Numa will talk more about this on the technology angle. Technology is always faster, G2B services, G2G services, than the policy. The particular challenge we see in developing countries is that very often those legal frameworks are inherited by the previous regimes in those countries, or historically inherited by colonial powers who did not intend to do inclusion or to do facilitation specifically on domestic businesses. So very often the policymakers in those countries do not even understand the legal framework and why it is there. What are the reasons for this particular business form, this particular identifier, or this particular agency to exist? So to speak, we have a multitude of problems, multi-dimensional issues, and we have a vast gap. In conclusion, vast gap between G20, OECD, and what's happening in the developing world. Thank you for that, and I'll continue in the second part. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dobro. Thank you for sharing that perspective that you have with your wealth of experience in so many countries. That is really very helpful. And as a UN person myself, I really appreciate you making the point also, how do we engage with the developing world and in the integration with the unique identifier. So thank you for raising that and the various sort of issues. You made already a reference to Numa. Numa, thank you for joining us and also making your time available to us. I know you just returned from Brazil, from your family holiday. So we already had a little bit of a back and forth between our two. Thank you for being available on short notice, and we look forward to your perspective. Dobro already made the reference to you on the technical aspect, particularly on the digitalization of this work. The floor is yours, Numa.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm very honored to be invited to this meeting. I think it's a meeting of like-minded people, and I don't know how to contribute so many ideas that are similar to my ideas, people that have been working with me in different projects in different areas, different times. So what I'm going to try to do here is to talk a little bit about the challenges and the opportunities, because I think that technically, I think this webinar already approached the different facets of business identifiers. And right now, like I just come after Dobro speaking, Dobro spoke about the legal challenges and also the different stages where economies are in order to adopt those interesting ideas. So to start, I think is as Dobro already mentioned, a legal challenge, right? So there are existing legislations that may be blocking the implementation of unique business identifiers. If the country decide to do that, that would be a challenge for the country that have a different legal framework in specifying how data should be used in certain agencies or not. So some harmonization would be necessary. So what we see when we go to a country, like in developing world, as you mentioned, Ivo, is that they are in a different stage. Some countries, they have legal framework that requires paper to be used. We work on a country that requires specific type of paper to be used in registering a company. And it was necessary to change the legal framework to adopt like digital data. So even the use of digital tools like digital signatures, digital names, digital databases, in some countries are still they're still having this challenge, right? So when we are talking about European Union and South America in one sense, I considered those countries in a different stage, and as Dobro mentioned, European Union is a very unique club, so to speak, because is a cooperation between countries that are in a very high level of technology, and they have access to different concepts, advanced concepts that probably you don't see in anywhere else in the world except the United States and the North American countries. So that would be, I think, the legal challenge would be one. Harmonizing this challenge would be necessary. I think if you're talking about lay and the global aspects of that, which is very interesting, I think that it would be easier to be done in terms of European countries and North American countries, but it would be a challenge in other countries. Even the legal framework for that would be necessary to be harmonized. But as I heard from the gentleman from IMF, I think that there is an opportunity there also, because if you're talking about global trade and global finance, there is an interest in security. There is an interest in intelligence, and I think that there should be some interest in harmonizing trade data. You have unique business identifier for companies that are trading. Okay. Now, in other countries, you don't see that. Or in other countries, as Dobro said, there's a huge amount of informality. The companies are afraid of the government. Some countries, more than 50% are informal, and they don't want to be taxed. They see the country as an entity that blocks the development of the private sector, and not vice versa. So the legal would be a challenge. The capacity would be another challenge, because the vision of process reengineering from the paper-based or agencies that have their own data. Sometimes those agencies in a particular country, they are very protective of their data, and they have their business identifiers, and they don't want to share that. They don't want to have to give this information to anyone. They see this as a security, not a security problem, just not for the country or their state, but they also see as their own job in the risk. Because when you're streamlining, when you're re-engineering processes, you are going to be touching agencies that have specific needs, and in some countries they are very powerful. So those little empires of companies, of agencies, they have an interest to have their own data and their own identifier. So there will be also, they wouldn't have funding to build databases and to do interoperability with those databases. They would need the interoperability framework and a champion, as Dobro mentioned, to make them share their data. And the funding is very scarce. So the resistance would come from inside these agencies, and sometimes there is a political agenda. Sometimes there is a lack of knowledge that would create opposition to those changes in the practical sense. In terms of technical, since Dobro mentioned that, the technical problem that I see as most impacting would be the fact that very commonly, the data for small enterprises, individual enterprises, are based on individual tax ID numbers. And for other types of legal entities, like limited liabilities, they use another number. So there are multiple numbers used. And in terms of having one unique number for all the entities in a country-based, it would be necessary to have several changes into these registrations. So Viveka mentioned that the journey of Norway in terms of having a unique business identifier. I remember talking to people from Norway and BSR. How was this challenge done in Norway, which is a very developed country in one way? In '95, they created a registry, a unique registry for business, and it took a while for it to come to fruition, create a great impact, but it was not simple. It was a journey too. So I wanted to raise these challenges. Again, the opportunities that I see opportunities in terms of trade data and creating unique business identifier, global unique business identifier for trading. I think very, very necessary for, and especially if you're talking about security and intelligence for fighting fraud. I think would be a good start. Okay, so that's all I have. I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Noma, for adding your perspective on that, and you already started to reinforce some of the messages that others were indicating, that you basically support and provide direction. I'm conscious about the time, and I'm sure that Julian is also looking at the time. We still need to do one more session on the recommendation. So I'm a bit worried opening it up, but I said I would come back to the panelists. If we can just give a few minutes maybe for the panelists maybe to reflect or maybe have some closing remarks, but we should then try to stick to it. I think there's a closing session that we have for 50 minutes. Maybe we can shorten that to 2 or 3 minutes so that we can pick up. So we have sufficient time for Julian to come up with a recommendation. So as I promised, dear panelists, who wants to come up? Just put up your hand and then, Gerard, go ahead.
I'd like to start with a statement of the former ECB president, Mr. Jean-Claude Trichet. He has made a statement in 2010 on the global legal identifier for legal entities. Here is the statement: every one of us needs it. There can only be one of it. No one can do it for themselves. We must do it together. That is the statement of Jean-Claude Trichet. From an ICC perspective, I think I made it clear: exporters, importers, banks, and logistical force, definitely the ICC supports the unique business identifier project and believes that the lei is the best way forward. I have also ICC covering not only the Western world, also the development countries. There is a study of the Asian Development Bank, I will send it afterwards to you, where it is made clear that the lei program was working in the Far East, even in those markets that are still in process of development. From an ICC perspective, not all legal forms need to have an LEI. Maybe only 2 or 3 per country that are used for the international supply chains and or the capital markets. So probably it makes sense to have a dialogue with the business registers involved and the global organizations that are talking already about these issues. I don't know, but that is not my job as ICC.
Thank you, Gerard, for making that plea of the unique identifier very clearly. Thank you. Any of the other panelists who wants to come back on some of these remarks? Dobro.
Thank you so much, Ivo. I just want to say 2 things. One, would be helpful if the World Bank can contribute further in mapping out those legal forms around the world, and also mapping out the mandates. Which other agencies besides the business registry have mandates to issue business identifiers? I think that's the starting point. This mapping is already done, of course, in OECD to a large extent. Such mapping is done on a country-by-country basis. It is not standardized in the World Bank, so that we can know that out of the existing 5 or 6 or 10 numbers, one can take a lead. So we know what we're dealing with here, right? The benefits, undoubted. On the Global Organization of Business Registries, I have my old friend Rico Dunn here, who is currently with Glyph, but he represented Netherlands for so many years. We have 4, 5, 6 organizations. One is called CRF, Corporate Registers Forum. They have annual meetings. There is a European organization called EBRA, European Business Registration Association. They have also annual meetings. There is a North American organization. This is the oldest one. It's called IACA, the International Association of Corporate Administrators. It includes US and Canada, but also has observers from around the world. We have ASORLAC, which is organization for the Latin America and the Caribbean. So maybe it would be good to invite some of these people here in this forum or share events. They have global events. If we continue the discussion offline, I can provide and facilitate contacts between those organizations. And maybe Rico can say something as well, since he's online, as he's more familiar with these organizations than myself. Thanks.
Yeah, very quick reaction. During the second webinar, I did a little presentation on different aspects of business registries, including these 4 organizations. So we are very happy to work together, and if Dobromir and I can do some work together there as well, then that will be wonderful.
You referred to the IACA president. I think he's actually online.
She's online, yeah.
Yeah. So Dobro, we will definitely follow up on that, and definitely also with the IACA president. Enrico is the spider in the web for us, so he could really facilitate a lot of these contexts. But good point that you were making in terms of bringing various people together. I quickly move to Numa. Numa.
Hi, I just I support this initiative wholeheartedly, but I just want to add it that Gerhard is mentioned about import and export initiatives in ASEAN, if I remember well. But there is an effort from WTO, World Trade Organization, which unify trade data, and I'm positive they use also unique business identifier. I don't know if they are participating in this webinar, but I think they would be an interesting player in this arena, since they use this data for intelligence and security in different aspects. Food security is one of them. So this would be one suggestion.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nomaya. Excellent, all these suggestions of that broader coalition that we actually try to bring together, which will be brought up also with Julian in the next session. Vibeke, the last word is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to come back to something that I think was mentioned quite early on in the webinar on bringing practical experiences, right? I think we are getting it to this webinar series, but I also know that countries really benefit from getting concrete practical experiences on how it's been done, even for a small part of the sector. So maybe that's something we can collaborate on between this group and also the collaborative on administrative data to create concrete case studies, put them down in writing and share them. We do have an inventory of resources where it could be placed as well. So happy to collaborate on that and bring examples also from the lower resource context, where I think the need for good examples is the strongest.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And thank you for your offer also to open up your vault of knowledge. I know you have a huge knowledge base being developed over the years, so it's great that we can bring all these different threads together. Also, of course, the Vienna group of Unicitral from the trade law is, of course, very important with Monica on the call. So it is bringing also the UN sort of initiatives together. Thank you, Vibeke, for making that public. I will not come to a conclusion to all this because I know what Julian is going to say, and basically he's going to conclude this very interesting panel discussion that set out the challenges very well, talked about the benefits of unique identifiers, and also gave way forward in various sort of way. And I will not summarize it. It will be done by Julian. At least, as always, as you, and we think a little bit of ahead of where the conversation will go in our preparation of the meeting. So we're trying to bring that together, and hopefully that will be a basis for further discussion. I just want to conclude that I think we know that this is a journey. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's a journey that we have to do together. So I think we should join forces, and the UN could be an important sort of body to bring all these forces together. It does that in its convening power. There seemed to be an important sort of call from the panelists of bringing these different sort of elements together in a coalition of the willing, and building out of that and building on these benefits for international trade, for security, for capital market access, and for statistics, as you will, for the integration of statistics and the reporting on the state of the economy, society, and the environment. I leave it at that. I turn now to Julian. Julian, you have the floor, but not without thanking the panelists for being available, and we will definitely follow up with all of you in bringing that coalition together. Thank you for making your time available. I know you guys are internationally on high demand, so thank you very much for being available to us at this point. Thank you. Julian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ivo, for moderating the discussion, and thank you so much for the panelists for your insightful contribution. And definitely, the importance for the unique identifiers being highlighted, and also mentioned the challenge. And also, we echo with Ivo the conclusion that this is a journey, and then this is not the conclusion for today's work. And we hope we are able to move on to the next step in order to find a way forward, in order to build a correlation, and then to support the work in order to advance this initiative. So in the next 5 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present some of the recommendation on the way forward on how we are able to carry on this initiative with the aspiration that we are able to bring this initiative into fruitful outcome to support the development of the unique identifier at the national level and the use of the global unique identifier for statistical purpose. So, and for the proposed way forward, some of the suggestion is also being echoed by the speakers and the panelists. And these are some of the things that we as an organizing committee together with our partners, we are currently thinking of. First, it's about the establishment of an advisory committee in order to guide this initiative forward and to build a correlation. Taking stock of the current situation on the use of the unique identifier for business, elaboration of a strategy to further guide this initiative, development of the guidance, communication materials, and also linking this initiative to maybe the existing global data platform in order to demonstrate the usefulness of this work. With regard to the establishment of an advisory committee, I think the aspiration is to establish a collaborative platform for countries and also for international organizations to strengthen the registration system in country. We also want to leverage on the various organizations and also various mandates and by different organizations to develop a common approach. And to this sense, and we're also quite grateful to hear and Dopper, the World Bank, and also mentioned they're willing to contribute about to the mapping of this. But here is about the advisory committee. So we hope that this could be used as an avenue to provide the advisory work forward, and also to explore the concrete ways to strengthen the legal registration of the business and the management of the unique identifier to improve for the improvement of the statistical business registry, to provide advice and recommendation on various elements of the work program, and also to solicit in-kind contribution and also support from various stakeholders. So yes, your support is very important in this regard in order to advise the work forward. So in 2024, and also the important to collecting the case study, the practical example is very important in order to further sensitize the information and to demonstrate the usefulness of the work. And so this is also an aspiration from the secretary is also to conduct global assessment in 2024 to assess on the use of the unique identifier for business, and also to develop a repository in order to collect the best practice and also case studies in order to demonstrate the utility, the usefulness, and also as a place where we can also learn from the other the country and also what the other is doing. So this is the stock taking exercise that we are also planning to do in 2024. So elaboration of a strategy to further guide this initiative during the panel discussion, and also the challenge is being well noted, and also there's also maybe some different maybe also stages of development compared to the more advanced country with a more developing country. And here is about pending of the resources. It's about the development of strategy to further guide this initiative, and also as mentioned by by Vibeke, and also how we are able to leverage on the existing maybe initiative on the administrative data, in particular, for example, the UN legal identify how we're able to seek synergy between the business register and also the civil registration register is also a point that we are able to build on in order to further guide this initiative. And again, and the last point, maybe this is also is a kind of a wish list, but I think this is about depending on the resources, if we are able to identify the possible pilot project in order to demonstrate the importance of a sound business registration system to improve the statistical business register, and also to map the global unique identifier with the national identifier and about their use to jumpstart. I think this is really an important step forward in order to really to carry on the work. And so this is also something that's at a possible way in order to carry forward this initiative. So again, development guidance and communication materials and develop an opinion statement on unique identifier for business, and also to mainstream this initiative at appropriate forums. For example, the regional training workshop on SBLs, and for coming UN World Data Forum, there's also a plan in order to organize a side event in order to highlight the importance of this initiative. And also we thank you also Jim when we mentioned about the data gap initiative, and this is also another appropriate forum whether we're able to leverage on the existing initiative to carry on the work. So finally, is the in collaboration with the OECD, and there is a multinational enterprise information platform, and this is trying to create a global register in order to understand the structure of the multinational enterprise and also the related work. At this point, maybe the information there is more related to the address, the names, but the unique identifier is still absent in the structure. Maybe one of the possible way forward is how we're able to link this initiative with this type of existing global register database in order to further enhance the database and then to demonstrate the usefulness in order to carry on the work. So this is something that we could consider in order to work on the future. So I'm running a bit very fast, but here this is some of the ideas and how we are able to continue to carry on the work, and in order to bring the initiative into a fruitful conclusion. So I will stop my presentation here, but your support and suggestion is also very much welcome. And also we are very much seeking for your contribution in order to move the work forward. At this point, maybe I will just maybe open up the floor to see if any observation or anyone who want to make any intervention here. I will open up the floor. Harald?
Are the slides available? Are your slides available?
Oh, yes. I will share the screen again.
Thank you.
Gerard makes the point whether your slides will be available on the website, on the web page. Julian, I think we make that available, of course, right? So the presentations are on the web page.
Okay, yes.
Which is very important. A good point that you mentioned, because these conclusions are important, and your reflection on that is very important to Julian, as these will go to the Commission. So it is important to reflect on that in more detail, and we'll do that also going forward to prepare for our debate at the Commission.
Okay, and with that, and we have come to the conclusion and the final part of our webinar. So I think in the successful organization of the webinar is very much a joint collaboration work. And here I would also like to thank on all the collaboration on co-organizer of this event and in order to support the work. And now I also want to give the floor to Rico, to Monica, to Hank, to Ivo, and also to give to say a few words as an opening remarks. So now I'll pass the time to Rico.
Very much, Julian. As one of the organizers in this group, I would like to first of all thank all excellent speakers of today and also the two previous webinars. That was really good to have you. Very happy with all the support for the use of a unique identifier for so many different purposes, which we have been talking about today: statistical, trade, supervisory, ESG, and in general sharing data. I'm very looking forward to to keep working together to create concrete follow-up activities. For example, also helping developing countries setting up systems with unique ID. And Glyph is, of course, very happy to work together to use the LEI when possible, both for national use, but certainly for international use, to be able to identify entities in an internationally unique scale. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll keep it very brief and go to Monica.
You, Rico, I will also keep it very brief. I will align it to your example, with your example, and in the sense that we really say just a few things. It's been so far a very pleasant journey for us. In the previous, I think Ivo just said that this is just a journey, the beginning of a journey. For UNCITRAL has been very surprising, getting to know that somewhere in the UN environment there was an interest for business registration, and there was another UN office working on business registration, of course in this case associating to a business statistical business registries. UNCITRAL actively promotes simplified business registries and registration with the aim to assist MSMEs. We find that the unique identifiers are one of the elements of simplifying business registration. They actually amplify the importance and the relevance of online registration. And unique identifiers also facilitate the cross-border exchange of information among business registries and also among interested business partners. The webinar series has been also a great way for us to highlight the importance of connections between between registries that that is not part of our of UNCITRAL mandate, but we are happy to keep collaborating and coordinating with this group to further advance common ideas and common agenda, and we look forward to the next phases of this journey. And we thank all the co-organizers and partners, the great role of UNDESA in all this, and all the panelists in this third webinar and in the previous ones. And with this, I'm giving the floor to Henk.
Very much, Monica. I did not prepare a final word, so I keep it also brief, and I echo some words that I heard from Rico and from Monica. I wanted to thank all the contributors, not only those of today, but also those of the first two webinar sessions. And I hope that all the organizations that helped us in those three webinars to make this a success, that they will also be available in helping us to move this initiative forward. So I think that Julian did a great proposal for some next steps. and well, I really do think that these are the right things to do. So hopefully we will see each other in the follow-up of these webinar series. Thank you very much for all your work and your contributions. And I need to pass the word, I think, to Ivo or to, yeah.
Yeah.
To Ivo.
Hans, thank you. I just echo others. Thank you very much for all your contributions over the 3 webinars. Also those that are now visible. And also, I would like to thank the panelists again that brought a wealth of information. As I just want to indicate, Julian, that I think you have a coalition for your advisory group that can be built out. There's an increasing understanding and interest that working together will make us stronger. There's a lot of work going on, a lot of knowledge that is available, but we can bring together more sort of in a uniform format. There's great work done on the different sort of models, including the model law, what Monica has been moving forward on Unicitral, and the coalition that she brings to vendor of legal experts in this area on the IT expertise. I think the coalition is something that we're looking for at the moment. So, and then the rest will follow. So I think you're in a well-placed position, Julian, to bring this to the Commission and seek their support of creating some of these initiatives that you propose. Again, thank you, UNSD, for organizing this and taking on this important initiative. I stop here. Back to you, Julian.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your encouragement and wonderful work, and thank you so much for your support. And also, as mentioned, we as a statistician, we are doing it alone is not sufficient. We also need the support from the other important stakeholders in order to carry the momentum forward, in order to, with an aspiration that how we are able to create a unique identifier in order to support the development of statistical business registry and then to improve the country official national statistical system. With that, thank you so much. And this webinar series really leaves us a really strong foundation for the important role for the unique business identifier. And as Ivo is also mentioned, this is just not the end of the journey, and this is another new beginning, and then the challenge ahead. But with your support, we're sure that we are able to continue to move forward. And your support is very important. So we are also very much looking forward to your continued engagement and contribution in order to move the work forward. Thank you so much once again, and thank you, Rico, Monica, Hank, and Ivo for your support in organizing the work. And definitely, we will also rely on your continued support in order to continue the work. And thank you all the speakers and then panelists today. And also at the end, I also want to thank you for my team, and then Jerry, Petro, Shelley, Tu, and Aida. They're also more or less in the background, and then with those speaking too much, but they're doing a lot of the background work. I also want to thank you once again for their support. So with them, thank you once again for your participation today, and we're also looking forward to you to continue to working together in this journey to advance this initiative. Thank you so much. Thank you once again, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.